This happened around 2013. I don't remember the exact day, but it was my first year of high school. Our high school was pretty old, and there was new construction going on at the time. They were planning to build a stadium and a new gym, but during that particular year, we still had to use most of the old building. The new building was already finished for most of our classes, but the cafeteria, gym, and some of the older elective classes were still held on the older side of the school. The layout of the school was kind of strange. I'd say about 80% of our classes were in the new building, while the older section was mostly used for electives. I don't know if every school does this, but at ours, we had to take at least one PE class or ROTC. I wasn't a big fan of running, so I chose regular gym. It was my freshman year, and my gym class was on the other side of the school. Since I was new and the building was huge, I was completely lost trying to find my way there. By the time I finally reached my class, I was already pretty late because I had expected it to be in the newer part of the building. As soon as I entered the old section, I noticed how different it felt. The hallway lights were dim, and there were barely any people around because only a few elective classes were held there. Since I was already late, walking through those empty hallways made me feel even more uncomfortable. I was always a little shy, so when I finally walked into the gym, I saw everyone sitting down. I told the instructor my name, and he told me it was okay. There was a rule in our gym class that every student had to wear athletic shoes and bring an extra shirt and comfortable clothes to change into before class. The boys and girls had separate changing rooms, and they were located across from each other. In front of the changing rooms was a tiny office for the gym instructor. On the first day, we mostly went over instructions, looked at the equipment, and learned what we would be doing throughout the year. The instructor also showed us the boys and girls' changing rooms. Each changing room had lockers where we could leave our backpacks, extra clothes, and shoes. There was also a bathroom attached to each one. The whole place was old. You could tell just by looking at it. The doors made loud, creaking noises when you opened them, and the lights were incredibly dim. At the time, I thought it was just an old part of the school, so I didn't think much of it. But the second day was different. That day, we actually had to change before class. The boys went into their changing room, while the girls went into ours. There were only about 5 stalls, and some of the girls were comfortable changing out in the open. I wasn't. I was pretty insecure at the time, so I preferred changing inside one of the stalls. Because there were so few stalls, everyone just took turns. Whoever got there first would change, come out, and go sit in the gym while the others waited. That day, I was one of the last few girls waiting for a stall to open. One by one, the other girls finished changing and left. Eventually, there were only 2 of us left. The other girl was much smaller than me, so she changed quickly and left. I don't even remember exactly when she walked out, but somehow, I ended up being the only person left in the changing room. And that was when it happened. Remember how I said the building was old? The lights suddenly started flickering. At first, I thought maybe it was just the electricity. I kept changing, trying not to pay attention to it. Then the lights went completely out. The room became almost completely dark. I couldn't see anyone around me, but suddenly I had this horrible feeling that I wasn't alone. It was one of those feelings that you can't really explain. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up, and I got goosebumps all over my body. The changing area was toward the front of the room, while the bathrooms were toward the back. There were no windows back there, so once the lights went out, that entire part of the room was completely black. Then I heard something. A movement. I don't know if it was a person or something else. I couldn't see anything, but I heard what sounded like someone moving around in the bathroom area. I froze. My heart started pounding, and I suddenly felt completely panicked. I didn't want to stay there long enough to figure out what it was, so I quickly pulled on my shirt, grabbed my things, and practically ran out of the changing area. When I reached the light switch, I managed to turn the lights back on, and that's when I realized I had put my shirt on inside out. I was so nervous that I hadn't even noticed. I quickly fixed it and left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been in that bathroom with me. The strangest part was that I knew I had been alone. I didn't tell anyone about it. It was my freshman year, and I didn't really know anyone in that class. In fact, most of the students in my school came from different middle schools within the district. so I didn't have many friends in that class. Eventually, though, I told my best friend. She was incredibly kind about it. She actually changed her schedule so she could take the same gym class as me. After that, she would stay behind with me while we changed, and we would always leave the changing room together. I never experienced anything quite like that again, but I could never forget the feeling I had that day. The absolute certainty that someone was standing somewhere in that dark bathroom with me. Later that year, we started hearing stories about that particular section of the school. Apparently, the old building had been there for a very long time. One story we heard was about a girl who had supposedly given birth there, but the baby didn't survive. I have no idea how much of that story was actually true. It was something we heard from other classmates, and like most school rumors, it was passed around without anyone really knowing the facts. A couple of years later, that entire side of the building was eventually closed off. The school continued its construction, and a new kitchen and gym were built. By then, I had already moved on from that class, so I never really went back. But even now, I can still remember that moment in the dark, the flickering lights, the sound coming from the bathroom, and that horrible feeling that even though I knew I was alone, something else was there with me. I was standing at the bottom of the staircase inside my university building. It was early winter. The sun was already gone, and someone upstairs was crying. Finals were coming up, so I stayed late to study. By the time I was ready to leave, the building was almost completely empty. Then, halfway to my dorm, I realized I had forgotten my jacket. It wasn't just any jacket. It was one of the few expensive things I owned, and I couldn't afford to lose it. So I turned around and walked back inside. The second I opened the door, I felt it. Something was different. The building that had been full of noise. Students, laughing, footsteps everywhere. But now, nothing. It felt abandoned. I stood there for a few seconds listening. Then I heard it. A cry, very faint, coming from upstairs. I slowly walked toward the staircase. There was a metal gate at the bottom. It was locked. The stairs beyond it disappeared into darkness. There were no lights on upstairs, no movement, no footsteps, just darkness. I stepped away from the gate. Old buildings make strange sounds. That's what I told myself. Pipes, heating systems, wind moving through the walls. Anything was better than thinking someone was actually up there. I turned toward the hallway. That's when I noticed my classroom door. It was slightly open. I was almost certain I'd closed it. I walked over and pushed it open. The classroom was empty. My jacket was still there, hanging over the back of my chair. I grabbed it and put it on. I picked up my backpack and was ready to leave. And then I heard laughter. Not from the staircase, not from the hallway, directly above me. I froze. It was a short laugh. Quiet, almost like someone was trying not to be heard. I looked up at the ceiling. Nothing. Then the entire building went silent, and suddenly, boom! Something slammed against the floor above me. The classroom shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped my backpack. I stared upward. For a few seconds I couldn't move. Then I heard something scrape across the floor above me. Slowly. Like someone was dragging something heavy across the room. I grabbed my backpack and ran. I didn't look behind me. I didn't stop to lock the classroom. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just ran through the hallway, pushed through the entrance doors, and kept going until I reached my... I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe maintenance workers had been upstairs. Maybe someone had accidentally gotten through the gate. Maybe the building wasn't actually closed. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd been going to that university for years. That upper floor was always locked after classes. Students weren't allowed up there. The next morning I went back. I found the custodian who usually worked in that building. I tried to make the question sound casual. I asked him if anyone had been working upstairs the night before. He looked confused. Upstairs? I nodded. I told him I'd heard something. A laugh. Then a loud bang. His expression changed. He looked at me for a moment before asking, "What time were you in there?" I told him. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, He walked over to the staircase and looked at the metal gate. Then he looked back at me. Finally, he said, "That gate hasn't been opened since 6. I stared at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I'm the one who locks it." I asked him if maybe another employee had a key. He shook his head. "Not after hours." Then I asked the question I probably shouldn't have. "What's up there?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Old classrooms, offices, storage." I waited. He looked uncomfortable. Then he added, "And one room that we don't use anymore." I asked why. He didn't answer. Instead, he told me something that made my stomach drop. Years ago, before the university renovated that floor, a student had apparently been found inside one of the classrooms late at night. She had been studying alone. She was found the next morning. After that, the university restricted access to the entire upper floor. I asked him if that was why the gate was locked. He nodded. Then I asked, "Was she found in one of the classrooms above mine?" He looked at me, and for the first time he seemed genuinely nervous. "Yes." I felt cold. I asked him which room. He pointed upstairs. Then he said, "The room directly above yours." I didn't say anything, neither did he. I just stared at the locked gate. Then I remembered the sound I'd heard, the crying, the laugh, and the heavy impact above my head. Before I left, I asked him one last question. "Does anyone still have access to that room?" He shook his head. "No." Then he paused. And that's the strange part. I looked at him. He lowered his voice. "Because every few months, someone says they hear things up there." I asked what kind of things. He said footsteps, someone crying, sometimes knocking. Then he looked at the staircase. And once in a while, he stopped. I asked, "What?" He looked at me. Laughter. I never stayed late in that building again. But there was one thing I never told the custodian. The sound I heard that night wasn't just laughter. Right before I ran, I heard someone whisper my name, and it came from the room directly above me. When I was 16, I went to a boarding school in the mountains. I would prefer going school from home. But since my house is located on the upper mountains, it was really hard to travel back and forth, especially during the wet seasons. So my parents had decided that it was best if I just went on boarding school that was located on the lower side of the mountain. It was an old school, the kind with stone buildings, narrow hallways, and dormitories that always smelled faintly of dust and wet wood. Only one at the area. The first thing they told us during orientation was that we were never supposed to leave our dorm after the lights out. Even though we didn't have a bathroom in our room, we were recommended that we stay inside or use it prior to sleeping. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the second rule. We were told never to answer our name if we heard it being called from the hallway after midnight. The older girls laughed when they told us. They said it was just an old school tradition, a way to scare freshmen. I didn't think much of it until my first week. Our dorm room had 2 beds. Mine was next to the window, and across from me slept a girl named Maya. She was quiet, but we became friends quickly. One night we were lying in bed talking when the light suddenly flickered. Then we heard 3 knocks. Maya sat up. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. The sound had come from our door. We waited. Nothing. Then someone whispered from the other side. "Maya?" Her face changed. I immediately remembered the rule. Don't answer. Maya didn't say anything. The voice came again. "Maya, open the door." It sounded exactly like her mother. Maya started crying. Her mother lived several cities away. There was no way she could be standing outside our dorm. I grabbed Maya's hand and told her not to move. For almost a minute we heard nothing. Then the voice whispered one last thing. "Maya, you're sleeping in the wrong bed." The footsteps slowly disappeared down the hallway. The next morning we told our dorm supervisor. She didn't laugh. She just stared at Maya. Then she asked us which bed Maya had been sleeping in. Maya pointed to hers. The supervisor's face went pale. She told us to pack our things. We were being moved to another room. I thought she was overreacting until we were leaving. As I walked past the old bed, I noticed something carved into the wooden frame. A name. It had been scratched into the wood so deeply that someone had tried to sand it away. The name was Elena. I asked our supervisor who Elena was. She stopped walking, then she said something I'll never forget. She was a student here. What happened to her? I asked. The supervisor nervously said she went away. That night, Maya and I were moved into a different dorm. A few days later, our school held its annual Founders' Day ceremony. Every student was required to attend. At the end of the ceremony, they displayed an old photograph from decades ago. It showed students standing outside the school. Our teacher explained that the photograph was taken in 1987. I wasn't really paying attention until I noticed something. There was a girl standing in the back row. She looked about 16. She was staring directly at the camera. I leaned closer to the photograph. I asked our teacher, "Who was she?" She looked at the photograph. Her expression immediately changed. Then she took the photograph away from me. That night I had a dream. I was stuck in the endless hall, then I saw a girl. As I get closer to her, it was girl from picture. I see her looking direct at me. I woke up sweating. That night I couldn't sleep. Then around 2 a.m. I heard Maya also woke up saying she had a scary dream, which was similar to mine. The only difference was that instead it was her. Then we heard footsteps outside our door. Slow footsteps. Someone stopped directly outside and whispered that sounded like someone was trying to call, "Maya." We didn't answer. The voice changed. This time it was trying to mimic my voice. "Maya, it's me." Maya looked at me. I was sitting right beside her. The voice outside laughed quietly. Then it whispered. I went outside to use the bathroom. The door accidentally locked. Maya looked at me in confusion. I could tell from her expression that she didn't believe the sound or me. Then I reminded her that what Warden had said, and she gave me the look of confirmation that she had understood. The footsteps disappeared. That night I somehow fell asleep. The next morning Maya was gone. Her bed was made. Her clothes were gone. Her backpack was gone. Her name had disappeared from the dorm roster. When I asked the supervisor where she was, she said she had went. I thought she was joking. I asked where did she go. She said her home. Maya was gone. It felt weird that she had left without telling me. I quit the school day later because this school was too weird for me. I never found out what happened to Maya, but every day I hope she is safe. It was my first week in university when I noticed the girl. It was late in the evening, and I was walking back to the dorm after evening study hours. Our school had a strict rule that everyone had to be inside the dorms by 11 p.m. I was carrying a stack of books against my chest when I saw her standing at the end of the hallway. She was wearing the same school uniform as me. She was just standing there, not moving. I assumed she was waiting for someone, so I walked past her without saying anything, but something made me turn around. She was walking toward one of the dorm rooms. I watched her disappear inside. The next morning, I asked my roommate if she knew who the girl at the end of the hallway was. She looked confused. "What girl?" I stared at her. "The girl I saw last night, at the end of the hallway." My roommate looked at me for a few seconds before asking, "What does she look like?" I described her. Long black hair, pale face, short, same uniform as us. My roommate's expression suddenly changed. "That sounds like the rumored girl. Who's that?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she told me that there had been a student at the school years earlier. She had lived on our floor, and according to the rumors, she had passed away there. After that, nobody really talked about it. The next evening, my roommate showed me something on her phone. It was an old photograph from the school's yearbook. There was a picture of a group of students standing outside the dorm. My roommate pointed at one of the girls. "Did she look like this?" I looked at the picture, and there she was. The girl I had seen the night before, same face, same hair, same uniform. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then I noticed something that made my stomach turn. The photograph had been taken 12 years earlier, and underneath her name someone had written, Mira 2001. She had been dead for almost 10 years when I saw her. I never walked through that hallway alone at night again, and I never saw her after that. But even now, whenever I see a clock showing 11:30 p.m., I get goosebumps. Since it's back to school season, I thought I'd share a little something scary with you guys. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the story. I know I only have a few subscribers right now, but I truly appreciate every single one of you. I'll be posting twice a week. I also have to balance college, so thank you for being patient with me and continuing to support the channel.